Are you a fan of audiobooks? Zig Ziglar used to refer to his automobile university, where he was always listening to audiobooks or other personal and professional development materials. Have you ever wondered how people get in to narrate these audiobooks? How about this? Do you have a desire to narrate them? Well, you don't need a voice like James Earl Jones or Sigourney Weaver to hire a professional audio engineer to assist you. Our next speaker, Kevin Spaulding, DTM, will share how he became a professional audiobook narrator and producer and share the basics with you so you too could get started in this exciting and challenging professional business opportunity. Please allow me to welcome Kevin as he shares his speech, Find Your Voice and Read a Book.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I appreciate the invite to be here this morning. This is something that I don't want to say stumbled into, but evolved into, much of which came out of some experiences I had in Toastmasters, and some other things just came out of some desires and passions I had. Raise your hand if you listen to audiobooks. What kinds? Anybody? Fiction, nonfiction?
Motivational.
Motivational? Good. Anybody else? Any particular themes? Science fiction?
Fiction.
Fiction? All right. Well, I typically don't do fiction. One of the things I'll talk about is focusing, if you do choose to become a narrator, finding your genre where you want to bring your voice to that particular area. But there's a broad cross-section out there. As broad a cross-section as you'll see in the library of hard books, there's about as broad a cross-section of audiobooks as well. That being said, there are many, many books out there that have not yet been brought to audio. And the market is there. You know, to begin with, it's disabled and sight impaired and all that. But I've heard people say that that's what this is for. And that is so short-sighted. Pardon the reference. But it's at least as much, in my personal case, I got involved probably about 10, 15 years ago. I was a runner, and I found books on tape, literally the cassette tapes at the library. And I thought, well, maybe I could use a little bit of my time a little more smartly. And I got myself a Walkman. Remember those things? Cassette tape. And I got a Zig Ziglar series of 6 CDs. And I thought of Zig Ziglar as, yeah, rah-rah, pom-pom stuff. But I started listening to him, and I said, you know, this stuff makes a lot of sense. And I continued to listening to audiobooks. And then very quickly I was listening to them in my car and making use of time and very much enjoying them and profiting from them. And then also myself, I happen to have a very strong faith, a Catholic faith, and I found a website that's out of Michigan. It's an ecumenical website that has a treasure trove of classical Christian literature from the earliest of the church fathers to late in the beginning of the 20th century. The upside of that is this is all public domain stuff, which means that it's freely available, there's no copyright on it, and that's as much of the legal stuff as I want to get into today. And what they were looking for was volunteers to help proofread these things. And then as I found one that I kind of liked, I thought, wait, an MP3? What's this about? And so I listened to it. And it sounded like a housewife sitting on her kitchen table with her laptop reading this particular book. I'm like, well, I wouldn't pay to buy this thing, but I appreciate listening to it. And I looked around and there were very few. And I asked, I said, hey, I could do this. And so I got a hold of them and I said, hey, do you have any particular books you'd like me to do? And so I was told, well, find something you like that's not there, go for it. And so I found the very first one I ever did, if this makes any sense to you at all, is actually called The Rule of St. Benedict. It was a Benedictine monk 1,500 years ago who wrote a rule of how a monastic community would work together. And it's about 2.5 hours long. And if you go to the website called Christian Classics Ethereal Library, ccel.org, and look up Rule of St. Benedict and listen to the MP3, you will hear my voice. I went on to do 6 different works for them, all volunteer basis. And ultimately where I am today, that was honing my skills. I've also heard Zig and others say, anything worth doing well is worth doing poorly. So If you're sitting here wondering, hey, I want to go out there and make money doing this, I suggest you do it for a volunteer basis somewhere for a while and learn your skills. Because even if you pulled one off and got one out there professionally, guess what? It's going to be there in perpetuity. And there will come a time that you're going to say, that's not the quality that I really want there in the marketplace. You might want to wait on that. And I know people are wondering, well, how much can I make doing this? I'll talk about this a little bit, but you know, if that's your attitude going in the door, I kind of suggest you look for something else in the meantime. This isn't going to generate an income to pay your mortgage next month, typically. But if it's a passion that you have, it's a skill you can develop, and you can take it to that level. But it's going to be a growing thing. I wouldn't suggest you quit your day job today. We'll roll the clock ahead to about a year or so ago. A member of my church, who was an interventional radiologist by the name of Dr. Marty DeMore, was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Well, actually, he was diagnosed about 5 years ago. And 4 years after that diagnosis, he wrote a book that was basically his memoirs called Joy and Suffering, My Life with ALS. And in fact, that was the book that I first did in the, if I can get this to work here for me, figure out which button works. There we go. Come on. Or I can just hit the down button. And that was, whoops, that was the first one. That was the first one, Joy and Suffering, My Life with ALS, because I heard a presentation on it, and by that point, he was not even really able to speak. But I said, Marty, if you would let me, I would be honored to give you a voice and produce the audio. And we worked together. He actually edited and made a bunch of changes. And we ultimately came up with that book, and that is available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes today. And you can kind of see it's available for $14.95, and it's a 4-hour book. And in fact, I actually have a couple of promo codes that if I have anybody that's particularly interested, or we do a little drawing of business cards, I'll offer to give that to a couple people. If you're willing to listen to it, and I would ask, if you like it, give it a decent review. And it's a very powerful book. It's a very hard book just to read to begin with, hard copy, let alone to read the audio book. It's emotionally very difficult, but I was honored to do that. And then time went on, and I did this through Amazon, through a system called ACX that I'll talk about in a minute, acx.com. And this system was one that's basically a marketplace to get narrators together with with books rights owners, publishers, find a mesh so that narrators can then produce the book and bring it forward. And again, ultimately to sell on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes in an MP3 downloadable format. Because that's the way the market's going. The market's kind of going away from the physical CDs. Although this can be set up in a way that if the publisher still wants to produce CDs, they can. So that's the basic gist. Is this making sense so far? Does anybody seem interested that they might want to take a look down this path? I hope so. All right, well, that was the first book. And again, that actually came out, I think it was back in August. And then I kept getting these emails from ACX saying, oh, here's all these books looking for narrators. Do you want to audition? Do you want to audition? And then also in the fall, I went to a very large Catholic conference in town, and I found a Catholic publisher called St. Benedict's Press. They're actually here in Charlotte. And I was talking to them, and they were interested in trying to bring many of their works to audio. And I said, well, hey, I'd like to narrate, and I'd like to try one. And we kind of went back and forth. And they said, okay, here's a couple you could try and do. And I wound up choosing the next one, Defending Marriage, 12 Arguments for Sanity. Okay, it's a fairly conservative view of the state of marriage, and if you want to have a conversation about that, that's offline. The point is that I found a book that I created, and this book happens to be about 6.5 hours long, and it too is available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. Now, this book, I actually worked out with them, and the contractual relationship we had was, as is one of the models under ACX, they paid me a flat rate per finished hour of the book, okay, as opposed to a royalty share. So they can sell 1 million copies, I don't get another penny. They paid me a flat rate. Now, why was I willing to do that? Was I willing to do that? Bottom line, I'm new. I want to build my curriculum vitae. I want to get my samples out there and start developing this. So I wasn't too worried about what I was being paid to do the book. When I amortized it out to what it took to actually produce the book, time-wise, well, let's say I was not far above minimum wage, but let's be real, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm trying to get started. Everybody's starting a new business. You gotta know, you gotta be able to work on it cheap to get things going, to learn your processes, prove your technology, okay? Then, as you can have quality that you're bringing to the marketplace, get closer to a fair market value for what you're doing. Okay? So I did that, and that book actually came live, I don't know, about 3 or 4 months ago. And then I went into this ACX area, and what I'll show you here, if I can get over to it, oops, I can hit the right buttons. This one. Why is this not going over to that? Hit escape, I'll have that used. No? Well, let me try to come down here. I'll bet if I hit this, that'll do it. No? Why am I not seeing the... Oh. If I go over to the ACX, what that is a marketplace, and you will see books there that you can then audition for. And the way that works is you can see a book, you can search them based on fiction, nonfiction. I search for military, that's my area. I'm a retired Navy Reserve captain. I flew on and off aircraft carriers. I understand the military mindset. Okay? So that's a space I want to go in, and I look for books like that. And if I find a book that has a little thumbnail, I say, hey, I'd like to try this. Then there's a button I click that says audition. And what I'll do there is I'll download the first 2 or 3 pages of the book, roughly. Kind of get a read through of that. And then what I will do is I will take and produce an audition tape, an audition file of that first 3 pages, maybe 6, 7 minutes, something like that. And I submit that as an audition. Then if the rights holder likes me, they hire me. Next thing I know, I get an offer back that says, hey, we want you to do this book. And oh, by the way, we'll pay you, it's typically a 50% royalty share, which means that in an unrestricted, and I know I'm dancing around the legal issues, but if the total royalties from ACX is 40% of the sale price, I get half of that, so I get 20%. Back of the envelope, a book sells for $20, I get $4, okay, on the revenue share basis. And I get this contract back, electronically I accept it. What happens next? They send me a manuscript, the whole book, usually in PDF, maybe Word. And then the next thing I have to do is I have to produce the first 15 minutes of that book. And I produce it, and whether I append it on to the audition or what I did or redo it, that's up to you. 15 minutes is not rigorous, basically the first chapter, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, kind of, that's the book. The rights owner approves the 15 minutes, good, you're approved to do the whole book. You don't get any money yet, but you're approved to do the whole book. You produce the whole book. Now, at that level, depending on the length of the book, it can either be done collaboratively, where it's like as I upload each chapter, they're, you know, hey, I like this one, this is good. Oops, you mispronounced something on at minute 9:26, and you correct that. Or, like one I just did approved the first 15 minutes, it wound up being a 10.5 book. She didn't want to listen to any of it until I was entirely done. Not what I prefer, but they own the rights. Okay. And then when I get all done, the rights owner will then accept the book, and then it goes into the ACX process, where ACX has to take, and they have to have somebody listen to it in quality assurance, and then it has to go through a whole process where it has to get encoded in the artwork and pages and all that. In English, from the time that rights owner hits accept until it's available to buy in the marketplace, all goes well, 2.5 weeks. That's what it takes. And then the book's out there. And then what happens? I'm also, even some of this I'm learning as we go along. ACX will give you some promo codes when the book comes out. What do you get all? Oh, you can send them out to people who will listen to it, and assuming they like it, will give you a good review. Because like any other social media area, people say good stuff, you're more likely to get sales. Okay. So we do that. And the 2 books that I just got approval on this week, let's see if this will, I'm going to have to use my cheaters here. There we go. that I just got approval on this week. The first one is When We Walked Above the Clouds, a memoir of Vietnam. This is a Green Beret's memoirs from Vietnam. And let me tell you, to say it nicely, it's very salty and unvarnished. Okay? It's not words I would use, but it's words that are real. Okay? And I worked at trying to bring the appropriate emotion to it. And the other book that just got approved, Boots to Loafers, is helping folks getting out of the military transition to civilian life. Well, what do you want to do when you come to the table of audio production? What's it take? Well, the first thing it takes is a passion. Not one to make money, but a passion about bringing audiobooks out. Then you need 3 legs under that table. This 3 means the table is going to be relatively stable, right? First one is you got to have talent. You're doing that here. Are people telling you have a nice voice? It's easy to listen to? Maybe there's potential there. You're developing your vocal variety. Want a good suggestion? Do the interpretive reading advanced manual, because that gets into some of that kinds of stuff. And you can develop your vocal variety and almost your voice acting, which is very important. The next one is you gotta have the technology. And I can show people afterwards, microphone, preamp, etc., and into a laptop software that goes along with it. The obvious question is, aside from the computer, about $400 to $600 worth of equipment. The third thing you need is a process, which means recording, editing, and bringing it forward. And I'll get in, and this is actually a picture of my recording studio. And you're gonna laugh, because that's my walk-in closet. Well, the technology's there, but guess what?
No wardrobe.
I'm surrounded by clothes that absorb sound. Yes, that's what you want. There's the preamp that I have over there, and audio digital converter. And then that's the software, what it looks like as I've recorded it and begun editing. So the process is you got to record with parameters, and we're kind of running a little short on time, so whether it's WAV, MP3, sample rates, and all that geek stuff. You got to back up and restart to a predictable pattern. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, just wash your tongue, can't do a thing with it. You're also going to have to save in appropriate formats, do noise reduction, high pass filter, then you're also going to do equalization and compression. And obviously we're not getting into the mechanics of that. And then to a level that is ultimately releasing. And the final one here, I want to give you some websites. And don't beat me up on the contrast. When it changed over to a link, I couldn't change the color. I tried more times than I could count, but I can gladly give this to anyone. I've emailed it to Joe. I know I'm out of time. I want to wrap up. Obviously, we do a session at the conference. I'm going to go a lot more deeper dive into the process and the mechanics and how to do that. I'm sticking around. I've got everything brought up for my dog and pony show and tell. I'll be happy to answer any questions and walk people through whatever they would like. And I hope this has whet your appetite a little bit, that maybe you can find your